My mother smiled when she handed me the eviction notice. Not a sad smile, not an apologetic one. A real smile. The kind you give a waiter when your entree finally arrives. She slid the paper across the kitchen table next to her glass of Pinot Grigio and said, "You have until Friday, Marin. Your brother needs the space." It was a Wednesday. I looked down at the document. It was typed, formatted, printed on their home printer. My stepfather, Gerald, had even signed it at the bottom with a notary stamp he bought off Amazon. It wasn't legally binding. I knew that because I knew the law better than anyone sitting at that table. But they didn't know that. "Derek's moving back from Portland," my mother continued, swirling her wine like she was delivering brunch gossip. "He and Shayla need the basement for the baby. You understand?" I understood perfectly. Derek, my younger half-brother, the one who'd blown through $90,000 of our parents' money on a failed vegan jerky startup, was coming home. And I, the one who'd been paying $1,200 a month to live in a converted basement with no windows and a bathroom door that didn't lock, was being tossed out to make room. "What about my deposit?" I asked. Gerald didn't look up from his phone. "What deposit?" "The $4,800 I gave you when I moved back in. You said it was refundable." He snorted. "That was 2 years ago, Marin. You think we kept it in a jar? That money went to the roof. You're living under that roof, by the way. So technically, you already got your money's worth." My mother nodded, as though this was reasonable accounting. "I want to explain something before this goes further. I want to explain why a grown woman with a career was living in her parents' basement in the first place. Because I know how it sounds. 14 months ago, my mother was diagnosed with early-stage lymphoma. She called me crying at 2 in the morning, saying she didn't want to die alone. Gerald was useless. Derek was across the country pretending to be an entrepreneur, so I came back. I broke my lease in Chicago, packed my car, and drove 9 hours to Ridgewood, New Jersey to take care of her. I drove her to chemo. I cooked every meal. I held her hair back when she was too weak to hold her own head up. When the treatment worked and she went into remission, I expected gratitude. I got a bill. Gerald sat me down and said my freeloading had to stop. He wanted rent. $1,200 a month for the basement, utilities not included. My mother sat next to him and said nothing. That was the moment I should have left. But I stayed because I was still holding on to the idea that if I was good enough, patient enough, useful enough, my mother would finally see me as something other than her first husband's leftover. She never did. Now, here's the part they didn't know. They thought I was a remote data entry clerk making $42,000 a year. That's what I told them. That's what I let them believe. I dressed in Target clearance rack clothes. I drove a 7-year-old Civic with a cracked windshield. I kept my work calls behind a locked door and told them I was doing overtime spreadsheets. In reality, I am a forensic accountant specializing in fraud detection for one of the top litigation support firms on the East Coast. My actual salary, before bonuses, is $285,000 a year. When I take on private consulting, it's closer to $400,000. I've testified in federal court 11 times. I've helped dismantle Ponzi schemes, insurance fraud rings, and embezzlement operations that would make your stomach turn. Why did I hide it? Because I grew up watching Gerald bleed people dry. He's a financial parasite, not the kind who robs banks, the kind who convinces you he deserves your money. He'd done it to my mother's first marriage, inserting himself into her finances before the divorce ink was dry. He did it to his own sister, convincing her to co-sign a boat loan and then defaulting. He did it to me the moment I was old enough to earn a paycheck. When I was 17, he took my entire summer job savings, $3,400, and told me it was family contribution. I never saw a cent back. So when I came home to help my mother, I hid everything. I wore the mask of a struggling millennial because I knew the second they smelled money, they wouldn't just ask for it. They'd take it. They'd find a way to make it theirs. And now they were throwing me out. I folded the fake eviction notice and put it in my pocket. "Okay," I said. "I'll be out by Friday." My mother blinked, surprised. She'd expected tears or an argument, something she could weaponize later at dinner parties. "Well, good. That's mature of you." Gerald grunted and went back to his phone. He was probably checking the scores. I went downstairs to my basement room. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the cement wall. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying about this family a long time ago. Instead, I opened my laptop and started doing what I do best. I ran the numbers. It started as curiosity, just a quick look at the household finances. Gerald had given me the Wi-Fi password years ago and never changed it. His email password was the same one he used for everything. Derek2024. He wasn't a cautious man. He was a lazy one. The first thing I found was the mortgage. The house at 27 Lakeview Terrace was refinanced 18 months ago. right around the time my mother got sick. They'd pulled $140,000 in equity out. I checked the disbursements. $28,000 went to medical bills. Fine. The rest? $35,000 went to Derek's jerky company. $22,000 went to Gerald's truck. $15,000 went to a home office renovation that I knew for a fact was the hot tub in the backyard. And $40,000 just vanished into cash withdrawals spread across 6 months. No explanation. No receipts. The monthly payments on the new mortgage were $3,800. Gerald's pension brought in $4,100 a month. My mother's disability was $1,400. That's $5,500 combined. After mortgage, utilities, insurance, and Gerald's truck payment, they had roughly $600 left for everything else. Food, gas, life. They were underwater. Not drowning yet, but treading hard with concrete shoes. Then I found the second loan. A home equity line of credit, opened 3 months ago. $50,000. I hadn't known about this one. The cosigner listed on the application was Derek, but the income verification section made me sit up straight. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Cosigner occupation, tech consultant. Annual income, $175,000. Derek was not a tech consultant. Derek was unemployed. He had been since the jerky business folded 8 months ago. His LinkedIn still said founder and CEO of a company that no longer existed. He was living off Shayla's teacher salary and calling it between ventures. Gerald had fabricated Derek's income to qualify for the HELOC. That's bank fraud. Federally insured lender, falsified application. Title 18, Section 1014. Up to 30 years and a $1 million fine. I saved everything. Screenshots, PDFs, metadata. I backed it up to my personal encrypted cloud, a USB drive, and an email I sent to myself at 3 different addresses. Then I kept digging. I found a second property. A rental condo in East Orange that Gerald had bought under an LLC called Terrace View Properties 2 years ago. The down payment came from my mother's retirement account. Her name wasn't on the deed. Gerald's was, along with Derek's. They had used my mother's money to buy a property and cut her out of ownership entirely. That's not fraud. That's just evil. But combined with the falsified loan application, it painted a picture. And I'm very good at painting pictures. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the blue glow of my screen, cross-referencing property records, bank statements, and tax filings. By 4 a.m., I had a timeline of every financial decision Gerald had made in the last 3 years. It read like a crime blotter. Thursday morning, I packed my things. It didn't take long. 2 suitcases, 3 boxes. I loaded my car in the driveway while Gerald watched from the kitchen window drinking coffee. He didn't offer to help. He just watched with that smug expression he always wore. The face of a man who believed he'd won every negotiation he'd ever entered. As I carried the last box out, my mother appeared at the front door. She was holding a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "A little something for the road," she said. "Gerald and I talked about it." I opened it. Inside was a check for $200 made out to cash. $200. For 2 years of rent, plus the deposit they never returned, plus 14 months of caregiving during her cancer treatment. $200. "That's generous of you," I said, and I meant it as the knife it was. She didn't catch it. She just smiled and said, "Family helps family." I drove to a hotel in Montclair. Not a motel, a proper hotel with a king bed and a bathtub and a door that locked. I checked in under my real name, handed over my black Amex, and tipped the bellhop $50. Then I sat down and made a phone call. "Nadine," I said, "I need a favor." Nadine Park was my former roommate from college, and now a real estate attorney in Manhattan. Sharp, ruthless, and the only person outside my firm who knew what I actually did for a living. "Name it," she said. "I need you to set up an entity for me. A trust. Call it Ridgewood Capital Holdings. Register it in Delaware. I want it to look like a small private equity fund that specializes in distressed residential assets." Silence. Then, "Marin, what are you about to do?" "I'm going to buy my parents' debt. I'll spare you the legal choreography, but here's the short version. Gerald and my mother were 3 months behind on the HELOC. The lender had already sent 2 warning letters. A third default would trigger collection proceedings. Nadine, through Ridgewood Capital Holdings, contacted the lender and offered to purchase the delinquent note at a discount. This is completely legal. Distressed debt trading happens every day. Banks would rather get 70 cents on the dollar now than chase a deadbeat for years. The lender sold the note. Ridgewood Capital Holdings, my company, now owned Gerald's $50,000 debt, along with all the rights that came with it, including the right to demand full repayment or pursue foreclosure. But I didn't stop there. I had Nadine's associate contact a title company and run a full lien search on 27 Lakeview Terrace. The first mortgage was current, barely, but the HELOC lien sat right behind it. If I called the note, Gerald would have to pay $50,000 immediately or face a forced sale. And if the house went to auction, the first mortgage would eat most of the equity. Gerald and my mother would walk away with almost nothing. I had the weapon. Now I needed the confession. This is where Derek came in. I knew Derek was coming to town that weekend. My mother had been posting about the family reunion on Facebook like it was the royal wedding. I also knew Derek was desperate. Shayla had told a mutual friend she was thinking about leaving him. He needed money, fast, to prove he wasn't a total failure. I created a LinkedIn profile for a fake recruiter at a tech staffing firm. I messaged Derek about a senior technical project manager position paying $145,000. Remote work. Full benefits. Start in 2 weeks. All he had to do was pass a background check and verify his employment history. Derek responded in 11 minutes. He sent his resume, which was 60% fiction, and agreed to a phone screening. During the call, which I recorded with consent under New Jersey's one-party recording law, I asked him to walk me through his recent experience. He lied beautifully. He described projects he never managed, clients he never met, and revenue he never generated. And then I asked the question I'd been waiting for. I see here you listed your annual income on a recent financial application as $175,000. Can you confirm that figure for our verification? Absolutely, Derek said without hesitation. That's my consulting rate. I've been pulling that consistently for the past 2 years. I had him on tape confirming the false income he'd used on a federal loan application. I saved the recording, transcribed it, and added it to my file. By Sunday, I had everything. The falsified HELOC application, the recorded confession, the hidden property bought with my mother's retirement funds, the $40,000 in unaccounted cash withdrawals, and the distress note, sitting in my trust like a loaded gun. I called Nadine one more time. Set the meeting, I said. Tell them Ridgewood Capital wants to discuss a restructuring plan. Tell them there's a way to save the house. Make it sound like good news. When, she asked. Friday, 1 week from the day they kicked me out. The meeting was at Nadine's firm in Midtown, 22nd floor. Glass walls, skyline views, the kind of office that makes people sit up straighter. Gerald came in first, wearing a blazer he probably bought for a funeral. My mother followed in a floral dress, clutching her purse like a lifeboat. Derek trailed behind, Shayla holding his arm, both of them looking around like tourists at a museum. Nadine greeted them warmly. She offered coffee, sparkling water, the full hospitality routine. She explained that Ridgewood Capital Holdings had acquired their outstanding debt and was prepared to offer favorable terms. Gerald relaxed. He actually leaned back in the conference chair and said, "See? I told you it would work out. People with money recognize potential." My mother squeezed his hand. Derek nodded like he understood finance. Nadine laid out the documents. A restructuring proposal. Extended payment terms. Lower interest rate. Gerald picked up the pen. "Before you sign," Nadine said, "the managing partner would like to join us. She has a few questions about the application." Gerald frowned. "What questions?" "Standard due diligence. Nothing to worry about." She walked to the conference room door and opened it. I stepped through. I wasn't wearing target clearance. I was wearing a navy Stella McCartney suit and heels that cost more than Gerald's truck payment. My hair was blown out. My posture was boardroom straight. I was carrying a leather portfolio that contained every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past 7 days. The silence that followed was worth every sleepless night. Gerald's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother's hand froze around her water glass. Derek's face went through confusion, recognition, and then pure fear in about 3 seconds. "Marin?" my mother whispered. "Good morning," I said. I sat down at the head of the table, not at the side. At the head. "Thank you all for coming." Gerald recovered first. He always did. The grifter's reflex. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" He turned to Nadine. "She's my stepdaughter. She does data entry. I don't know what she told you, but she's not." "Gerald, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I opened the portfolio. I'm going to show you something. I'd like you to stay quiet until I'm finished." I slid the first document across the table. The HELOC application. Gerald's face tightened. "This is your application for a $50,000 home equity line of credit with First Federal Savings. Submitted 4 months ago. Cosigner, Derek Ashworth. Listed income, $175,000. I looked at Derek. "You don't make $175,000, Derek. You don't make anything. You haven't filed a W-2 or 1,099 inches 11 months. Derek's mouth opened. Shayla's hand slid off his arm. I placed the second document on the table, the transcript of our phone call. This is a recording I made last Tuesday under New Jersey's one-party consent statute. In it, Derek verbally confirms the false income figure. He did this while applying for what he believed was a legitimate job. Gerald's face was turning a color I'd never seen on a living person, a grayish purple, like a bruise forming in real time. Falsifying income on a federally insured loan application is a federal crime, I continued. Title 18, Section 1014. Penalty, up to 30 years imprisonment and a $1 million fine. Both of you signed this document. Both of you are liable. My mother's voice came out thin and broken. Marin, sweetheart, we didn't know. You knew. I slid the third document forward. The property records for the East Orange condo. You knew when Gerald used $55,000 from your retirement account to buy this rental property and put it in his name and Derek's, not yours. You're not on this deed. She looked at Gerald. He didn't look back. That's a separate issue, I said, but it tells me everything I need to know about how this family operates. You take from the people who trust you, and you give to the people who flatter you. I closed the portfolio. The room was so quiet I could hear the elevator chime down the hall. Now, here's where we are. Ridgewood Capital Holdings owns your HELOC note. That's my company. I am Ridgewood Capital. I bought your debt for 68 cents on the dollar last Wednesday. I have the legal right to call this note due immediately. If you can't pay the full $50,000 within 30 days, I can initiate foreclosure proceedings on the house. Gerald slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this. I'll get a lawyer. You'll what? I said. You'll hire a lawyer with what money, Gerald? Your pension barely covers the first mortgage. Your credit cards are maxed. And now you have a federal fraud charge hanging over your head. What lawyer is going to take that case on contingency? He had nothing. His bluff collapsed like a card tower in a breeze. I let the silence sit for 10 seconds. Then I spoke again. Slower this time. I'm not here to destroy you. If I wanted to, I would have sent this file to the FBI on Monday and let the federal system do its work. I'm here because, despite everything you've done to me, I'm giving you a choice. I laid out the terms. 1. Gerald would transfer the East Orange condo into my mother's name within 30 days. Her money bought it. It's hers. 2. Gerald and Derek would sign a promissory note, acknowledging the $50,000 HELOC as their sole responsibility. My mother's name would be removed from all associated liability. 3. I would restructure the HELOC payments to a manageable schedule, 7 years at 4% interest, paid directly to Ridgewood Capital. If they defaulted, the fraud file goes to the FBI. 4. My mother would receive independent financial counseling from a certified advisor of my choosing, at my expense. No more joint accounts with Gerald. No more blind trust. 5. The $4,800 deposit, the $28,800 in rent I paid over 2 years, and the $3,400 Gerald took from me when I was 17, would be credited against the HELOC balance. That's $37,000 off the top. They owed me more than they owed the bank. And 6, I said, standing up. You never contact me again unless I initiate it. No calls, no texts, no showing up at my door. If I want to talk to my mother, I'll reach out directly. Gerald and Derek are not part of that equation. Gerald stared at the table. My mother was crying quietly. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Shayla had moved her chair 6 inches away from him. You have 48 hours to accept these terms, I said. After that, the file goes to the FBI, and I call the note. Your choice. I picked up my portfolio and walked toward the door. My mother's voice stopped me. Marin, I'm sorry. I turned. She was looking at me, really looking, maybe for the first time in years. I know, I said, but sorry doesn't cover the balance. I walked out of the conference room, through the glass hallway, past the receptionist, and into the elevator. The doors closed, and I stood there alone, watching the floor numbers tick down. They signed everything within 36 hours. Gerald didn't fight. He couldn't. The fraud evidence was too clean, too thorough. He signed the promissory note, transferred the condo into my mother's name, and agreed to every term without negotiation. For a man who spent his whole life convincing people he was the smartest one in the room, he looked very small sitting across from Nadine's paralegal, signing away the lie he'd built his life on. Derek and Shayla separated 2 months later. Shayla told a mutual friend that the loan fraud was the final straw but not the only one. Derek moved into a studio apartment in Newark. Last I heard, he was driving for a rideshare app and telling people he was pivoting to the gig economy. Gerald stopped wearing the blazer, stopped talking about investments, stopped pretending he was anything more than a retired man with a pension and a debt he'd be paying off for the next 7 years. The hot tub sat empty in the backyard. Nobody used it anymore. My mother called me 3 months later. not to ask for money, not to make excuses. She asked if I wanted to get lunch. Just lunch. I said yes. We sat in a booth at a diner in Montclair. She ordered a turkey club. I ordered coffee. We didn't talk about Gerald or Derek, or the house or the money. She told me about a book she was reading. I told her about a case I'd closed. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in 15 years. When the check came, she reached for it. I let her. As I drove home that evening to my apartment in Hoboken, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a door that locked perfectly, I thought about what family means. It's not a debt you inherit at birth. It's not a balance sheet where someone always owes and someone always collects. Family is supposed to be the one place where you're not a transaction. And if they treat you like one, you have every right to audit the books. I merged onto the turnpike. The skyline of Manhattan glittered in my rearview mirror. My phone sat on the passenger seat, quiet. No missed calls, no guilt trips, no one asking me to shrink. I turned up the radio and drove. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I want to see how far this story travels.